Makanya dicegah bakaunya jangan dipotong itu karena mencegah seperti tsunami. Itu kan kalau bakau itu termasuk abrasi pantai juga. Jadi itu harus dilakukan karena itu demi kenyamanan kampungnya kita.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fishing for Climate side event. I'm really delighted to welcome you all, also in the room, but also online. Thank you for joining. Welcome, Honorable Minister Sweeting from the Bahamas and other excellencies in the room, and all the partners we have partners with, like the Global Island Partnership and others at this side event. So I'm here to welcome everyone and really just give introductions to say this is a great example of how adaptation measures, and especially ecosystem-based adaptation, can be integrated into coastal fisheries management. And this is a way to celebrate how we are able to some of these innovative solutions and hear from partners how this can be done and what the effects have been and the impact over time. So with that, with no further ado, I'm really delighted to introduce a local mayor we have been working with in this side of project, Honorable Mary Tay, Mayor of Libertad from the Philippines, and she will share more of a local perspective on how we have been working with her and other mayors on implementing that nature-based solutions for climate change in small-scale fisheries. Mayor Tay?
Good morning, everyone. I am really honored to be with you today and share my cute little story about how resilient our cute little town in the Philippines. And I am Mayor Mary Jean Tay from the small island in the country. Just a little bit of preparation okay. So that's where I live. That's the fish that we usually catch. And actually, from a small artisanal community, we really started doing innovations for climate change. And I will be sharing with you today I quote President Obama saying, climate change is no longer some far-off problem. It's really happening now, and it's really present today. So that brings me to share with you our short story of a small coastal, artisanal, small-scale fishery community in the Philippines. And I'll be sharing with you our turning points and initial steps taken, challenges and partners, our accomplishments and nature-based solutions, and later on give you the positive impacts and our call. So, our turning point. Initially, fishing during those years was free for everyone. So you just can do whatever you want, whether it's, it's legal or illegal, whether it's destructive. during those years, fishing is really for big and wealthy commercial fishers. Rights of our small fishers are not being protected. They don't even have, they're not even interested to get into the process, not even the participation, because they thought fishing is only for wealthy commercial fishers. There was a massive destruction of the environment, both upland and coastal. It's not only illegal fishing, we also have a massive illegal mining and illegal logging in the area. And of course, the decreasing of fish catch, it threatens not only the economy, but on every fishing household in our municipality. Food sufficiency is not enough, and fishers have to venture into farther fishing areas that would be more expensive for them, will be exhaustive and dangerous. And of course, all this problem was exacerbated by climate change, which was at that time was just a plain concept. And the changes in the sea level, the sea temperature, also affects our corals sea ecosystem. And during those times, coral bleaching is seen and fish stocks drastically decreases. So what we did, after all this turning point, in 1996, that was like 26 years ago, we started implementing Coastal Resource Management Program as early as 1996. And then we entered into alliances of our neighboring towns. We call ourselves Lipaseco, which we share one common resource base we call Pandan Bay. And we also did the protection and establishment of our natural park, both the marine and the upland. We have a natural park in the upland, and we also have huge MPAs in the area. And we also partnered with allied NGOs like the national government organizations, and of course NGOs like RARE. We had been partners with them, and I'm so thankful because at that time we were, until now, they have assisted us so much knowledge, technical skills, and attitude. They also assisted us in the implementation and appropriate effective strategies and even financial linkaging and assistance. And there was continuous engagement of the people in the community. We made people as the center of every action that we did. We made them involved in all the planning, the consultation, and in the implementation and monitoring sustainability. They are actually our main actors. Now, after that, but all this actually was not as instant success for all of us. We have so much issues, and along the way, it led us to some great alliances. And during those years, as we implement the CRM program, there's also some obstacles that we encounter. Like we have resistance from the community. Because at that time, people thought they are being restrained and deprived from the resources that they think they owned. So less participation, very low appreciation of the policies and laws, and of course, lack of policy support on the climate change and coastal resource. At the local level, there were no policies on cascading climate changes in the area. It was as if the policies are only in the inter-country or in the national level. And small communities like us struggle to formulate our own agenda. And of course, the threat to political survival. Most of the leaders or the mayors, of course, has to think twice in implementing a make or break program like this because, they thought that they're gonna lose the election if they will insist in implementing that. But the welfare of the people is very paramount. This kind of political attitude plus strong political will, a leader can survive and thrive. So part of our success, of course, is our allies. We never did that alone. We have the national government, the environment fisheries sector agencies like the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. We also partnered with NGOs like RARE, Biocon, Philincon in the upland. We also partnered with civil society organizations who are aligned with our goals. And we also aligned with other local government units, the academe. And of course, we make people as the main actor and as making them not an obstacle, but an ally. So, and all this year's engagement has resulted to the different breakthroughs and actions. We were able to successfully declare, next slide please. We were able to successfully declare 40% of our land area as a natural park in 2002. We call it the Northwest Panay Peninsula Natural Park. That's the last low elevation forest in Panay Island and is important in adapting to climate change. We have now a strong alliance of 4 municipalities in the coastal resource management, joining one another in sharing one resource base. And alliances focuses on policy making, program implementation, and enforcement. We also have passed and implemented new fishery ordinance with managed access areas, where we have put climate change adaptation measures as well. And in partnership with WARE, we have launched the Fish Forever program, where we were able to create behavioral changes among the people and increase their knowledge on climate change adaptation and their participation to different conservation initiatives. We have now 8 thriving marine protected areas, which is protected from any destructive activities and also help reduce the effect of climate change to our fish stocks. Now, here are some of our ecosystem-based climate change. We implemented mangrove improvement project, coral propagation, bamboo propagation, wetland rehabilitation program, river and watershed stewardship program, and establishment of climate change center that we're planning to put up. So, I guess with that, later on, we're open for whatever questions you would like to raise as we explain further our story in a cute little town like Libertad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor Tay. It's good to not only start with a video to see sort of action on the ground, but then also sharing an example. Thank you so much. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Kate Brown, the Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership, who will introduce the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call on our panelists to come forward, which is Rocky Tam, and Mayor Tay. Oh, there you are, Mayor Tay. So we're going to give an opportunity. So I'm Kate Brown with the Global Island Partnership, and we're really excited to be partners with RARE, both on the side event and project implementer with them on this project on fishing for climate resilience, which this sits under. I'm going to let our speakers talk a little bit in this opening session, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask them some questions. So our first speaker will be, Ms. Rocky Sanchez-Torona, who's the Managing Director for Fish Forever from RARE. And I'll pass you the floor. I will not give long introductions at this point.
I'll just show you a few slides to add context to the whole project of Fishing for Climate Resilience. The work that we did with Mayor Te in Libertad, we started that in 2014, is really part of a broader program called Fish Forever. And the key element of Fish Forever is really the idea that you can pair protection or no-take reserves where habitats can recover and where fishery populations can recover and people really stay out of that. Pair it with managed access areas where the use of the resource or the fishing is regulated. So in these areas, we regulate who gets to fish in these places, and they agree on the kinds of rules that they'll have and the regulations that they'll have so that they are the ones that really benefit from the spillover that will eventually come from the the protected areas. So we think that this combination really provides the right package of incentives for fishers. So that's what we've been doing. And next slide, please. And all over the world, we've been working in 8 countries under Fish Forever. We have been working with over 1,400 communities covering 57,000 plus square kilometers in these managed access areas. And part of that work that we do, especially with municipalities like Libertad and Antique, is help the communities do climate change vulnerability assessments to really understand the impacts of climate change on their fisheries. And at that, and using that information, we then feed that into management plans that the communities can then implement and do similar things to what Libertad has been doing. All these numbers are for the rest, for all of Fish Forever, and then 20,000 are the actual direct beneficiaries of Fishing for Climate Resilience in Indonesia, Philippines, Palau, and FSM in Micronesia. Next slide, please. So this is the focus of Fishing for Climate Resilience, the project that we're describing today, which is funded by the German government. And these are the countries that we have been working on, and specifically partnering with 36 municipalities. We started the work with Libertad in Antique prior to Fishing for Climate Resilience, and when we went into this grant, we actually used Libertad as a bright spot. It was really kind of like, it was the anchor for the other municipalities in her coast, and then similarly, we had a few other municipalities in other areas that became the basis of an inspiration for the other municipalities that were doing the work. Next slide, please. So for Fishing for Climate Resilience, our goals were really to increase adaptive capacity, both in terms of the ecological resilience and the social resilience of the communities, really strengthening the governance and the readiness of the communities through these climate change, climate smart action plans that I was describing earlier. And then really facilitating learning across not just the Bay and neighboring municipalities, but across countries and across the globe as well. And then when COVID started, the German government actually launched a green recovery program that was added on to Fishing for Climate Resilience. And that enabled us to think a little bit through how to integrate EBA and green recovery initiatives into the work that we're doing and use it as a tool for COVID recovery. And then lastly, it's really kind of like, because the Fishing for Climate Resilience is actually the first EBA project that's been funded by the German government for fisheries, for coastal fisheries, we really felt that this was an opportunity to really surface lessons and bring that out to a global audience as well. Next slide, please. All right. So some of the kind of the lessons that we're learning, we're winding up with Fishing for Climate Resilience, and we're really seeing that the fisheries really have big climate implications. This is because people are so dependent on it for livelihood and economic and socioeconomic resilience. This is something that we cannot ignore. Another piece is really around the ecological resilience as well. So being able to help the communities identify which areas need to be protected, how they should be managed, is really going to be key to making sure that the resources that they have in the habitats are going to be able to withstand the impacts of climate change. And then another piece that we found out really from the green recovery work is that if we're able to really surface and help the communities understand opportunities for incorporating EBA approaches into their businesses, and we call them micro-enterprises, they actually can have a path towards formalization and actual greater financial resilience moving forward. Next slide, please. And then at the same time, and this is something we're learning from FSM and Palau, that traditional management practices, actually a lot of them are already EBA compliant, and therefore these are things that need to be incorporated into the management plans that we're doing, because that's really keep them resilient moving forward. And then lastly, and Mayor Te already talked about this a little bit, is really the importance of this being a community-led effort. It's these types of fisheries are scattered and disaggregated, and there's very hard to manage this top-down. Communities really need to take ownership of the resource, and they need to be the ones to make decisions about how to manage this, and we need to make sure that that happens. I think that's my last slide. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rocky. That was awesome. I'm going to ask Tam Alafayo, Greenstone Alafayo, who will be our next speaker. She's the Conservation Manager with the Micronesia Conservation Trust and has spent the last 20 years working in Micronesia.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I didn't prepare slides, so forgive me. You'll have to use your imagination. But I'm, again, Tamara. I work at MCT. I've been working with the Fish Forever program and RARE over the last number of years in FSM. But I did want to introduce a little bit about a regional initiative in Micronesia where RARE and all Fish Forever and all of the projects that we engage in sort of fit under. So the Micronesia Challenge, well, first I should ask, or I should share where Micronesia is. There's a number of people from the region over there in the corner, so I don't have to tell them where their home is. But for the rest of you, Micronesia is in between. If you envision the equator, and then you see Hawaii, and then you see Japan. There's a whole bunch. There's the largest ocean space right between Hawaii and Japan. And you've got the Marshall Islands. You've got the Federated States of Micronesia. You have Guam. Guam is a U.S. territory, but it's Micronesia. You have the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, also a U.S. territory, also Micronesia. And then you have the Republic of Palau. There are also two other Micronesian jurisdictions. There's Nauru and Kiribati, but MCT doesn't work in those two jurisdictions. They're in the South Pacific. They're taken care of, I guess, or they work with New Zealand and Australia more. So MCT, my organization, we work in those 5 jurisdictions. So in 2006, the president of Palau, as well as the president of Marshall Islands and the president of Federated States of Micronesia and the governors of those 2 U.S. territories, they decided to sort of lead the world. At that time, it was new. They challenged us by signing a high-level declaration to effectively conserve 30% of our nearshore space, our nearshore ocean, nearshore coastal fisheries area, and 20% of our terrestrial land in that region. At that time, 30%, now 30 by 30 is something that everyone's looking towards, but at that time it was very unique and very novel. There are a number of people over here. I feel a little bit shy. There's some people from Palau here who were part of that engagement. Charlene is actually the national focal point for the Micronesia Challenge. She sits on the Micronesia Challenge Steering Committee for Palau. So forgive me, Charlene, if I say anything that's inaccurate. So this was what the leaders set us. So it was a top-down approach, which they tasked us to support them in this. So what we had to do is start working from the bottom up, because as we know, locally led action doesn't work from the top down. So we spent MCT, my director, Willie Kostika, who's from Pohnpei, he established the Micronesia Conservation Trust in order to access funding that communities could not access. He established MCT so that we could start accessing large green, at the time there wasn't Green Climate Fund, but that kind of funding, so that we could get funding into MCT and then we could sub-grant it and give it to communities so that they could support and follow the lead of the leaders and set their areas into effective conservation. And I think effective is the key. That's another part of an important part of locally led action, and really an important part of why we need to have communities. We can't just sit, no offense to the COP or to the UN CCC, but we can't sit here and make commitments unless people on the ground are implementing, because you can make a protected area or you can make a managed area, but if it's not being managed properly and people don't know about it, then it's not effective. In 2019, Charlene was there, the steering committee and the chiefs, the leaders of the region, increased the commitment. They upped our ante. They had to be ahead. By that time, the world was looking at 30, so they asked us to conserve 50. So now we're looking at 50% effectively managed near shore, 30% terrestrial. and I guess to bring it back to Fish Forever. So at MCT we garner funds and we just support all the communities across the region. And the MC is a sort of while it's different cultures and different languages and different people from this giant space, the MC sort of unites us, and I think it's a bright spot in that everything we do can be seen as part of the Micronesia Challenge. So in FSM and Palau, we're supporting the Fish Forever. And what we're doing there is through the managed spaces, we have funding. For instance, here's a direct outcome of the project where I'm getting there, Kate. It's okay, I can talk all day. We're supporting RARE to put natural resource coordinators inside each of the municipal governments. So they're right within the government, but they're also community members. And so RARE is offering technical support to help them to lead their communities through these management planning exercises. And that's part of the Micronesia Challenge. Everything that we do has become part of the challenge. I think what's important is that we're looking at the importance of locally led management. And I don't think I really have to preach to the choir in this room, but some of the important things that I think Fish Forever has enabled and the Micronesia Challenge as an umbrella has enabled is that locally led action is community planning. It's not dictated by the donor. And I do think that's an important thing to just acknowledge in RARE. As a donor, they've come into FSM and allowed the communities to dictate how they're going to implement the project. And I think that's really important. We have to acknowledge that that's the importance. And then traditional local leadership. In FSM, in Pohnpei, the very first thing that they did was sat down with all of the local leaderships and capacitated and supported the chiefs, got their permissions, and then hired the national resource coordinators. I think locally led adaptation is also empowering. Again, maybe preaching to a choir, but if you come in from the top down and you tell people what to do, they don't feel that they own anything or they're part of it. And I think Fish Forever was able to also just support that in Pohnpei. And I think two other things that are really important about locally led action that I'd like to bring up is, as you brought up, the preservation of traditional values and, really importantly, already established mechanisms. FSM, from the national government right down to the communities, already has established mechanisms. We have a protected area network. We have all of these important ways that we implement. And I would advocate that locally led action can only be successful if we're not trying to remake and reinvent the wheel. And finally, capacity building. And I think RARE was able to also do that with their technical expertise. Capacity building is a long game. And so through the Micronesia Challenge, we have this umbrella, and then we have MCT and others are supporting ongoing initiatives, and RARE played right into that, and we just keep going and capacitate so that people have the capacity to join their traditional knowledge as well as the things that we're learning, the technologies and such that we're learning. So I guess I should stop now.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge that we actually have a video. I'm not going to play it now because I think we just need more time for our in-person panel, but we'll share it with people after this. And it would be from Nicole Franz from FAO, and she has an important message to share. But I'd like to actually, in the interest of trying to engage the audience, ask if anyone has questions for our panel, and then I also have some questions. We have about 6 minutes to get through this, so I'll ask if you have a question to state your name and what your question is, and then we move from there. We only have one microphone, so you're going to have to bear with us.
Any questions?
Thank you. Sorry. Hi, my name is Jessie Turner with an initiative called the Ocean Acidification Alliance. I'm happy to be here and get to see you. Apologies that I walked in late. So Rocky, I didn't hear the full beginning of your presentation, but working on ocean acidification, we're really trying to think about how we connect governments, scientists, community, fisheries with the right information to help in that decision making around where, when, what local conditions are going to look like. And I'm just curious how you've kind of thought at RARE about, in the climate context, that sort of, what are the tools, from like the monitoring, forecasting to think about that at different scales?
Thanks, Jesse. And I'd love to talk with you a little bit more. We don't do enough on acidification, so that is something that we want to factor in. But I think overall what we really try to do is pull together the science, let's say the state of the habitats, the ocean currents, and kind of like potential for sea level rise. Pull that together into a climate change vulnerability assessment that includes the household surveys and kind of socioeconomic data. And then we package it and present it back to the community in a way that they can appreciate. And then we guide them through the participatory process of actually doing management planning based on that. So it would be great if we could actually integrate more of that science into the inputs to the process.
Thanks, Rocky. Any other questions? Otherwise, I have some questions. I'd like to ask Mete, actually. How have you been able to connect your very local actions into this kind of global space, also given that you're here at the Climate COP?
Actually, I'm just so thankful that I'm here right now, and then I was able to learn a lot. Particularly, for me to be able to connect with the local and international forum, for me to be able to share my stories and probably inspire others, and make sure that, to let the world know that in a small little town like Libertad, there's some climate change initiative that we've been doing to make sure that our food is sufficient, people are involved in every process, and government is not just not doing anything, but we're doing something to make sure that we have a better future for our children.
Do you mind if I jump in? I just wanted to add, Mayor Te is actually part of a group called Coastal 500. It's a group of mayors and local leaders from all over the world who are part of the Fish Forever work. And their goal is really to advocate for coastal fisheries and really protection of resources for coastal communities.
That's awesome. And Tam, what are your thoughts on the next steps in Micronesia, taking some of what has happened through both the Micronesia Challenge and others out into the world?
Thank you. I think importantly, in 2019, when they upped our ante for our 50% protection, they also added livelihoods, climate change, fisheries, invasive species, and importantly, sustainable finance to our goal, acknowledging that conservation and climate change do not exist in silos. And so I think that that's probably something that, at least at MCT, if I may share, MCT was one of the first organizations to receive an adaptation fund project that was a project to support protected areas in order to make communities more resilient to climate change. And it took us 3 years to convince them of that connection. And so I think that maybe that's where we're at, is using the Micronesia Challenge and using the work that we've done to sort of go out into to talk to the large donors and to talk to GCF and Adaptation Fund and convince them of the local needs. Because in Micronesia anyway, and I'm sure it's everywhere, even in the coast of all countries, if we don't have resilient coral reefs and we don't have fisheries and our ecosystem services are broken, when the climate, the storms and the other things that happen to us, we're not ready for it. So we have to protect those ecosystems. I think just quickly, the Micronesia Challenge did in fact inspire a lot of international initiatives. We were one of the first. So you may have heard of the Caribbean Challenge, the Aloha Plus Challenge, the
Best Challenge.
The Best Challenge. Kate was also very much a part of the beginning of the Micronesia Challenge. So we've been inspired. The Micronesian region, through the Micronesia Challenge and such, has been inspiring the world for some time. And now being part of GLISPA and the Local 2030 and supporting and working with RARE, I would say that the Micronesia has a very small, maybe small population with a large ocean space, has made a giant impact.
Indeed, all very transformative. And Rocky, I just wanted to in the kind of closing, because we're closing, this session, but there are other bits. Could you reflect a little bit from the findings of your preliminary results on some things that really surprised you, just in shortly?
Sure. Well, one, COVID really took us by surprise, right? It came right in the middle, right at the beginning of the project, and we had to learn to reboot how we did a lot of things. We learned to do a lot of things virtually, but it also surfaced a lot of opportunities, especially around the livelihoods and kind of like that idea that ecosystem-based services and this kind of work really can support recovery moving forward.
And that's an awesome way to finish this really wonderful set of speakers. And we're going to move into the next part of this event. And I'd like to thank all three of you. We could have sat here for about another 3 hours. And let me move the one microphone over here.
Thank you, Kate. So thank you for sharing lessons learned and best practices, and also really recognize that, you know, while you pilot something, you want to scale it. And I would like to ask the next panel to come. So Simon Young, David, Jason, and Dr. Yackel, please come to the panel. We have been honored to have a group of people who are financing solutions like this. And so obviously when you have political commitment, both from the national and the local level, we want to now see how can you implement some of these things. And obviously financing is one of the key factors of that. So I'm really happy to have a great panel sitting with me here. And to start with, I would like to ask each of you to share maybe one sentence. What have you also, you know, coming to what Kate said, what have you learned here? I know that some of you are already partnering with some fishing communities and have sort of fisheries in sort of your portfolio, but for some, this might be new. And so with further ado, I want to introduce maybe each panelist first, but then you can already think about what would you would say. So first we have Jason Spenceley, the Senior Climate Specialist for the Global Environmental Fund. Welcome. Then we have Simon Young, the Senior Director with Willis Towson Watson. Then we have Dr. Yackel from the German government and David Desalo from the BFA group. But Jason, you start and just passed on.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, to be with you today. I'm sorry, I have to say two things, because the first thing I learned is that if you want to run a good panel, have very insightful women speaking and then have the men with the suits follow. The second thing is I've been reminded of the fundamental importance of local action and how the different elements, especially from you, Marité, the elements that come together to create that local movement, which of course is inspired elsewhere in the Philippines and globally. So thank you for that.
You said exactly the two things I was going to say. But it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invite. I honestly, I think the community-based level at which this stuff needs to be built from is really critical, and connecting that to, you know, the world of high finance, you know, in London and New York is something that we need to work on really hard. And I think we are able to do that. We can make these connections, and I'll call out Jason here and a Jeff project that we're doing. So this time 2 weeks ago, I was at in a village hall on the coast of Fiji, in a coastal community, sat on the floor in traditional dress, doing some basically some financial inclusion training, some insurance training. We played insurance games. We played other games. Mainly women, by the way, so we really have to get down to that level and to build these things up. We can't be imposing things from above, but financing is a very important part of this story. And what struck me actually, the title was how fisheries can build climate resilience, but the fisheries themselves have to be resilient as well. And I think that's where financing can come and play a role.
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, I'm pretty new to the subject. I started in August, the adaptation work. And from a donor's perspective, these kind of projects are not in the center. I can tell you these bottom-up projects, working with local communities, and also these coastal projects are not in the center. But this has been, I would say, this approach have to be revised. I see a lot of merit in both approaches. The bottom-up approach, because it's much better for implementation. When we work with the communities and you convince the people to do that, and being also a diver, you can see what is needed in coastal management and fishery management. You can see what the kind of commercial fishery can do harm to the coastal zones. So those things are very much needed, and therefore I'm very glad that I'm here for the project, even if I'm not the responsible guy in our ministry for the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I also learned a couple of things. Just very briefly, what we've been doing within BFA is launch a program that literally launches startups acting in the blue economy, addressing community issues, community problems with innovation, with new technologies. So what I learned, I was pleased first that it's working. The numbers were fantastic. Congratulations. It must have been a lot of work to work with so many communities and protect so much space. I also was very curious to learn that there's 500 cities already connected. I assume that's virtually, right? And Rocky, you mentioned that COVID kind of changed your plans, like everyone else's, I guess. But I think you hinted that you still were effective despite COVID. And I would assume that there was an element of digitization to make that effectiveness happen. So I was left intrigued to just wonder, could we port the model where you connected 500 cities so you can connect 500 communities digitally? Is this something that you guys are thinking? So that's the question I was left asking myself, like what is the role of technology and what technologies to boost, to scale these phenomenal results, right? So that's the question I hope maybe you can answer.
Okay, I will continue to ask you questions, then open to the floor as well. So we always, I mean, yesterday there were some other events here also on financing oceans and fisheries. And, you know, we often talk about blended finance and how do we, you know, get public and private funding and sort of the insurance company in here. So I think it's great that we have a panel where each of you are representing some of these different financial mechanisms coming together. And I would like to ask you, based on sort of what you have learned, but also where do you then now see your role in sort of, increasing financing, but really sort of also working together. I would love to see what your thoughts on working together. I know that some of you are already working together and there might be opportunities to explore more. So I would start maybe with Simon, and then you can pass it.
Thanks, Ariana. So I think it's important. So I come from the insurance sector, but I'm not an insurance professional, to be honest. I would say I'm a risk management professional trying to bring the tools and products of insurance to bear on something that really isn't addressed in the traditional insurance industry, or not addressed very well, at least. And we've had all sorts of innovations coming through over the last 10 to 15 years in this space. In the broad space, but it hasn't been applied to kind of coastal communities, to fisheries in particular, quite a lot in agriculture, but not in fisheries, which is, so over the past 2 or 3 years, and particularly with RARE, we've been working to try and unlock the potential here and exploring some of the things we can do. But I should first off point out that, I was hoping you'd go to Jason first, because, you know, the finance comes in from people like the Jeff, right? But that finance needs to have some security around it, that it's going to be used and it's protected against the impacts of, let's say, climate disasters. So you don't want to invest a lot in a community and then for that all to be wiped out without any way back. So what insurance can do, and as a risk management tool, is to enable that financing to be sustainable, because the thing it's investing in is it can be sustained after it's impacted. So I'm just going to highlight very quickly three areas where we've been working. One with in the Philippines with RARE, which was to actually test out whether we could get traditional insurance tools into these communities. I think my takeaway at a very high level, and Rocky, please correct me if I'm wrong, but at a very high level was there is appetite for tools that are already in existence. So life insurance, for example, needs on the ground, engagement with these communities. But we have, I think, the platforms are there for that. But in the Philippines, we had a chance to test what happens when actual events happen. And there it wasn't so smooth. And there is a lot of work to do to make the payouts more efficient, make sure that they're made, honestly and quickly, et cetera, and not put a burden on the insured to make those claims. So I think that was a really good lesson. And there are some tools which are going to be deployable. They need to be deployed in a very careful way, and the insurance companies need to understand what the client base is that they're working with and take accommodations for that. So I think that there's definitely progress we can make on things already on the shelf. Then the second part we've been doing is to develop some innovative insurance tools. And one of those is we're working again with RARE in the Philippines, now expanding into some other places, which is to actually think about fishers, even individual fishers and their business, and what happens if not if a typhoon goes through the Philippines necessarily, but what if there's a succession of days in which they can't fish in that month, because their cash flow is so vital to their livelihood. If they can't fish for a couple of weeks in a month during fishing season, then they're in real trouble. So what we've tried to do is capture bad weather, unfishable weather, and put that into an insurance context. And this builds on work that was done in the Bay Islands by Steve Box and others. And we think that has traction, and we've just got funding to expand that and take that to, and the Philippines government are going to support that. We also have a project starting actually back in the Bay Islands, which is great, and in Indonesia as well. So I think that's one area. Another area we've been working on is reef insurance and the applications of reef insurance to the fishing communities. I think is very interesting. And just to plug that the work we've been doing with the Mesoamerican Reef Fund. Across the Mesoamerican Reef, the reef insurance there actually triggered last week for Hurricane Lisa in which hit Belize. So we're actually making a payout right now on that. In that case, it's used for urgent reef recovery, but other contexts it could be paid to fishers to not fish on the reef for 2 or 3 months to allow the reef to recover. So those kind of mechanisms are now starting to be kind of mainstreamed, I would say, and certainly conservation organizations are very, very interested in that. And then there's a third area that we're looking at, which is more looking at using quantitative data and triggers to actually trigger funding flows, not from in the insurance market, but from other sources. So grant funds triggered automatically and to support broader resilience across communities, things that are less tangible, but and really can't be supported by paying insurance premiums, but are still worthy of surge funding when critical events happen. So that's some of the things that we've been doing in this space to try and kind of unlock finance and support finance coming in and protect it from events.
You mentioned Jason.
Okay, thanks. The first thing I'd like to say is just to reinforce that the Micronesian Conservation Challenge really has been an inspiration, I think, globally for the world. Not just for other challenges, the Coral Triangle Initiative and the Caribbean Challenge and so many others, But I don't think it's a coincidence that we're talking about 30 by 30 in a few weeks at the CBD COP, that nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based approaches are now mainstream in the discussion in the Climate Change Convention, which was not the case 15 years ago when my MCC was getting going. So kudos for that. And what's most inspiring to me about that is that things that endure are things that matter. And hearing about how it's deepening is really great. Second thing, if we look at multilateral finance for small island developing states, the truth of the matter is, as you know better than us sitting here, there isn't that much available for climate change adaptation, frankly, for climate change adaptation specifically, for small island developing states that aren't least developed countries. If we really look at the numbers, the truth is that there are 8 LDCs that are small island developing states, SIDS, and they receive quite a bit of multilateral finance for climate adaptation. Non-LDC SIDS receive very little. It's the truth of the matter. We just did an analysis across the GCF, the GEF, and the Adaptation Fund, and the SIFs, and there's very little. We have just created a new strategy in the GEF for the next 4 years, which is being approved by our board, donors and developing countries, that calls for a great infusion and a ring-fest dedicated funding to non-LDC SIDS, sorry for the acronym, non-least developed countries, small island developing states. So that includes Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Philippines, and many others. One target is $400 million US, a dedicated fund that's under the Special Climate Change Fund for non-LDC SIDS. Now, that's a strategy, and we're just in the midst of discussions right now, today, tomorrow, over the next few days, to see what will happen. If it happens, there's a lot we can do together. If that gets replenished, if you will, or dedicated funds, then there's a lot we'll be able to do together. We have some great projects with BFA Global, with Willis Towers Watson, in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, and non-LDC SIDS, doing really innovative stuff. But if I can be honest, it's relatively modest, scale-wise. And we need to do much, much more. And so we need funds in the Special Climate Change Fund, is what it's called, in order to be able to support more SIDS. But this is also the case for GCF, and I used to work at the GCF, and for the Adaptation Fund. There's SIDS it's a competitive world. There's no fund that's dedicated to non-LDC SIDS where you're not competing on a playing field with countries with an awful lot of capacity, very much larger scale countries. So let's hope that we can get that, and then we'll be able to do much more together. In any case, we're delighted to be working with people like BFA, where we're creating, the funding gaps are huge. The funding needs are huge and immediate. So, creating investment impact funds where we're using limited public finance from the GEF to catalyze private capital with a highly successful Catalyst Fund. We're friends, but we negotiate really hard how much funds we give vis-a-vis theirs, because we need to get as much private capital out of any public capital to go into beautiful projects and activities like yours. The work with Willis Towers Watson is a real pleasure, and the partnership with Germany is deep and continues, and ICI has been a basis for International Climate Initiative, has been a basis for so much action across SIDS and across the world. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jason. So David, you have been named as well. So tell us a little bit about what role you see the BFA Group plays, and then I will hand it out to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Jason, for the connection, because that's what I wanted to draw out of. As we were saying, the funding is just not enough, right? At least not the public funding. But some elements could be funded by private investors. And what are they going to be looking for, right? That's what we need to think about. What elements of your wonderful program, not all of it, I'm sure, but some of them maybe can be scaled through technology, and they'll fund it. The investors will come and fund it. That's what we've been working with Jason on. This venture launcher, this is essentially an opportunity for local leaders to young, actually gender balance. We have 50% in our current wave, 50% are women, 50% are men. and they're coming up with ideas, with visions of startups that are anchored in creating impact in the biosphere, so conservation or regeneration, anchoring creating impact in the atmosphere, so drawing carbon down through nature-based solutions typically, and also creating impact in the communities through livelihood. So if you start with that lens, what can you do, right? What can you achieve? And startups are risky. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but if you have a portfolio of them, and they're all run by local leaders, then some of them will survive and will thrive, actually, and they will attract this impact capital, right? And which is a complement. The public funding can start the motion, can create the movement, and then the private investors, when they feel they're sufficiently de-risked, they can come in and put in real checks on the table, right? And scale some of these wonderful innovations to make us all very proud and to benefit the planet as well, right? So that's what I would love to maybe discuss with you later. What are the opportunities that you're seeing for scalable innovation? I heard a few. You were talking about financial inclusion. That's a field that has a rich history of doing a lot of work with communities that don't have a lot of resources but can lever them up, right? I also heard the organizing element. Could that organization be digitized in a way that then could be scaled, and someone, maybe startup, gets launched to scale that? That would be also fantastic. And I'm sure there's more. I just didn't have enough time to go into. In the program we're launching, we just launched and we're working in right now, we have 4 areas of innovation. We call them areas of opportunity. One is small-scale fishers. The other one is aqua farming, either seaweed farming or fish farming. The other one is insuring natural assets. And the 4th one is blue carbon. All of these are ripe for innovation. What we need to do is launch, attract really smart people and equip them with the support from experts, with the financial support, so they can make a living like this, and have them progress, right? And start as many as we can. Our goal is to launch 100 in the next 4 years. 100 is just a 3-figure number. I hope we do 1,000, right? If we get more support, because there's so much need. There's Micronesia, and we've been doing this work in the eastern shores of Africa. There's the western shores of Africa, and there's Latin America, and there's Southeast Asia, and there's Polynesia, and there's so many different places where this could be happening. And that's what we hope to build, a big wave of innovators, and start them. And then the private sector will scale those that are creating value sufficiently, right? So I'll stop at that, and I'll pass it over to you.
Sorry? Okay. Let me share some thoughts from a donor's perspective, that these kind of projects are a bit more difficult for a donor, because you rely on certain figures, indicators, and working with a lot of communities, working in a lot of places, these kind of projects are quite often more difficult than others, just working with 1, 2, 3 governments on, and so still we think this is absolutely important to do these kind of projects, but we also are of the view that a fund-related funding is a good way to do that, also to get a bit of a relief for our capacities, which are indeed limited to monitor the projects. Therefore, we co-initiated the Global Adaptation Fund, and we also initiated the Fund for Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. And these kind of funds are also, in our view, an instrument to support such projects. And we will also try to work even more and to enhance our commitment regarding these funds. But also in the new thematic call, which was launched just recently, of our international climate initiative, we have two projects in the Pacific. One is the strengthening the resilience of Pacific islands, and the other one is protecting the freshwater resources. So two areas which are very important to look at, and this thematic call is out now. Of course, it takes some time until the project starts, but this is also a sign of that we recognize the importance of this kind of work with the global, with the small island developing states.
Thank you. Is there any other urgent question? Otherwise, what we would like to do, we would actually ask all the speakers to come up with one sentence of a commitment. So we have heard what works. We know the solutions are there. We have now heard from the different, from the finance sectors, what are some of the solutions you're already working on. But, thank you for sharing also some of the obstacles. And so we want to like to get from the side event is also, what are your commitments? So you've learned something. We know now where we all are. And what are you taking with you? Just one step, one sentence. And I might pass the microphone first to the panelist here, and then I will turn to you. So Mayate, what is your one commitment you're taking from here?
I will always work for the people, and I will always make people as the center of development.
I think a lot about scale. So I think we're trying to really put together what we're learning from the projects that we're implementing and make them much more easy to share and pass on.
Tamara.
I guess I'll just continue to share, what Micronesia has been doing and try to support others who may want to follow in their footsteps.
Likewise, I'd like to really continue to kind of build some of the partnerships between different organizations and local communities and countries and see what happens by the next COP.
Okay, David.
So I already kind of made our commitment. We want to launch 100 startups that are creating this impact in the three spheres: biosphere, human sphere, and atmosphere. And my commitment is maybe to work with you and see how many of them we can launch within your region. How does that work?
Yeah, the commitment is that we will look further into the issue of resilience of island states. I can't tell you any figures, but I can tell you my minister will do next week.
So our commitment is to bring the best of the private sector, but through the lens of working with individuals and communities, and connecting that community-based need to the kind of international financial architecture.
I renew my commitment to do all I can to make sure that there's more funds available for SIDS and for Fishers and SIDS for the great stuff that you're doing, that we're doing together, because we need to do more of it.
Thank you. And my commitment is to bring some of these discussions to the CBD COP. Jason, you mentioned it already, 30 by 30. But there are also climate commitments sort of under the new global biodiversity framework. So it's really good that we bring sort of these finance index discussions also to Montreal. So that is one of my commitments, which is also a good segue to pass it on to Dr. Jäckel to share a little bit also some of the closing remarks. Germany, obviously, under the G7 presidency, has put the ocean deal forward, and we are seeing sort of the G20 coming up in the CBD COP, and so it would be great to get some thoughts from you on that side as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks very much to RARE and the Global Island Partnership for organizing this event. Yeah, I think it's a very important issue, and for us addressing both the climate and the biodiversity crisis, and in one project and under our international climate initiative is an important aim. And therefore, I'm I'm pretty happy to do the closing remarks. Today we learned about how interlinked these climate and biodiversity crises are, and the IPCC report on impacts, adaptation and vulnerability shows that maintaining the resilience of biodiversity and ecosystem services at a global scale depends on effective conservation of 30 to 50% of Earth's land, water and ocean areas. So the coming years remain crucial for this increased ambition, and that's what we are aiming at, that we intensify our efforts also in the adaptation area. And there were commitments made in Glasgow, and we stay with these commitments. And we are also convinced that the G7 ocean deal reached under Germany's G7 presidency constitutes an important cornerstone for the effective conservation and protection of at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030. Hope so. In order to reach these targets, we rely on your expertise and experience, and this is why we consider our exchange and collaboration extremely important. Let me share you at the end some political issues and some facts and figures of our international climate initiative. Since 2008, ecosystem-based adaptation has been one of the key funding priorities within the international. So 2008 was already quite early, and the climate initiative has contributed to make EBA's firmly established approach for adapting the impacts of climate change. So that's we are happy that this is the case now. To put it in numbers, we are currently supporting more than 50 adaptation projects with a funding volume of 380 million in the international climate change. I know that the Ministry for Development Cooperation of Germany is also financing even more adaptation projects with even a higher value. The focus is on national adaptation plans, but also on ecosystem-based adaptation. And Germany and also our ministry will support and scale these efforts. As I said, figures will come next week. Moreover, together with the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs, we just launched the new ICI call with two calls, two parts of it with freshwater resources for Pacific Islands and resilience for Pacific Islands. So let me close by emphasizing the relevance of today's side event. Thank you very much for that. I learned a lot. I'm new to the issue. Since August, I'm heading the new division responsible for international and European adaptation. Thanks very much for that, and thank you for organizing it here, and wish you all kinds of success. And thank you all for being here and joining us in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hickel. Yeah, thank you to everyone who participated actively, to all the panelists, to everyone online. You can also download the Fishing for Climate Resilience preliminary report of the results. So if you want to dig deeper into some of the facts we have been sharing, I think it's great that we have some commitments moving forward and really ending with some of the next steps. And what we also had, what I forgot to mention in the beginning, with all of the side events in this pavilion, there is a cartoonist online who is listening to the conversation and then drawing some cartoons to sort of summarize the discussions. And I believe we have them online to share. Okay. Over for you, darling. What guarantees us security than decades of cops? Okay. Effective resilience looks like UPAL, climate resilience, marine conservation. Local leadership, collaboration, financial security, nature-based solutions, data and science, great. And that's a lot of holes to repair. Extreme weather changes, marine habitat destructions, gaps in communication, financial loopholes. Now that's the secure net. Great. I think we have 3, yeah? Yeah. Thank you. This is great. Oh, another one. Perfect. I love all these. I think it's good. It's also good that we remind ourselves that we have to sort of be hopeful and laugh, and sometimes, yeah, really also see the bright side of it. This is why I'm really delighted that we were able to see some of the bright spots, that we know that is working, and now sort of it's really a matter of scale. So with that, thank you everyone. Thank you for being here, and we will be outside to ask further questions. Thank you, Ronan. That was really lovely. Thank you.